Folks, we make this statement all through the off season that once media days arrives, look out because it's here. I know the football's not on the field, but the season is here and it's going to come fast and furious for especially those of us who talk college football, create content, and respond to all of you. Because once we hit media days, there is news every day, even if it's just talking season kind of news. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, everyone. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here, which has included today my recently released prediction on, speaking to the Big 12, for now, for one more season. Oklahoma, our prediction is out there. Please check out the video just released here in the last 2 hours. We have just arrived here from our Miami show. Please check it out with Cam Underwood from State of the U, our weekly Wednesday Miami show. Also, our Michigan show today with John D'Adamo. We appreciate John hosting our Michigan show at the Voice of College Football. Our Florida State show, great time with Big Game James Coleman and Chris Frazier from Spear Addicts, our Florida State live show. And it now seems like it was 4 years ago at 11 a.m. Eastern time every Wednesday is our Ohio State show. Tony Gerdeman, Steve Hellwagon joining me today talking Buckeyes. So plenty of content, plenty of live streams, debate, discussion, analysis on all of those shows. And we are going to do up the Big 12 big this week. That was my goal. We have scheduled media to arrive and address their particular teams and the conference from Texas, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, TCU, Kansas State, Iowa State, UCF, and West Virginia. And we are doing our best to round out the entire conference with other media contributors. So welcome in. We'll talk Big 12 football. We will not limit our discussion to Big 12 football, but I am going to lead with the Big 12. But of course, we have left the link to the live show here in the chat. So if you would like to join the show, please join us. The live link is there in the chat. I did not include it in the description section. I had formed a habit. I've done a tremendous job of remembering that until tonight. I guess it takes 3 weeks to form a habit, correct? And it's not been 3 weeks. So the habit has not been established of me remembering to leave the link in the description section. So my apologies, but the link is in the chat. We are here on our Texas channel, Oklahoma channel, West Virginia channel, and right here on the main channel as well. So if you're not aware of our team channels, please check them out here at the Voice of College Football. Too many to roll down and list right now. Too many to give the roll call on the Voice of College Football channels. But most likely your team is represented right here at the Voice of College Football. So please subscribe. What is most important about Big 12 Media Days, unless something breaks like it did here in the last few days in the Big 10 with Pat Fitzgerald fired at Northwestern? Check out that live stream. Really good discussion on that debacle at Northwestern, what's next for Pat Fitzgerald, and more importantly, what's next for Northwestern. But speaking of which, unless something to that degree drops in the Big 12, and hopefully that will not be the case, what is most important are what these conference commissioners have to say, and especially in the Big 12, because what Brett Yormark is bringing right now to the Big 12 is an assertive, aggressive approach. So he sees this conference as having the opportunity to expand, to grow in a changing landscape of college football where the Big Ten and the SEC are taking over. He does not want to just idly stand by and allow that to happen. He probably knows, if he's as smart as I believe he is, that there is no catching the Big Ten or the SEC. However, the Big 12 can stay relevant. By sheer numbers, they can stay relevant. So reading from The Athletic today, Brett Yormark met with, of course, the media today. And I want to let everyone know we did have a couple Big 12 contributors canceled tonight, unfortunately, because we were anticipating a big monster night covering Big 12 media days. I did not get a chance to see anything from the Big 12 today. So we will continue this Big 12 narrative and storyline throughout the week. And again, Texas, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, TCU, Kansas State, Iowa State, UCF, West Virginia. We have booked media from all those schools, all those teams to discuss the Big 12 this week. But unfortunately, our contributors canceled tonight. So you're stuck with me, and I am reading for the first time. So this is one of our workshops here at the Voice of College Football. We will work through this together on what Brett Yormark had to say today. Talking about the opportunity of expansion if it presents itself, but is content to stick with 12 members going forward. That's a standard comment, of course, because if the expansion doesn't work out and he says, no, we're hell bent on expansion, and then there's no expansion, then he looks bad. And on the other hand, if he says, no, we are completely content with 12 Big 12 members, we are not expanding. Well, of course, he's not going to say that. And especially he's not going to say that because it's been all over the news for the last 6 months. He is looking to expand. He says, Brett Yormark, that we do have a plan, and hopefully we can execute that plan sooner than later. That's all we need to know right there. You don't have a plan not to expand. You have a plan to expand. You would not have a plan not to expand. Has anyone here had a plan just to sit on the porch or a plan to sleep on the couch? Well, you have, but that's a one-step plan. It's not necessary to actually build out or really work through the plan to create the plan. So if they're not going to expand, if they're not planning on expanding, that told us everything we need to know right there. Yormark says, we do have a plan. Hopefully we can execute it. So he wants to expand. And that's no surprise to anyone. But as I've always said, I love the composition of the conference right now. The excitement of the 4 new members have brought to this conference has been incredible. Well, that's a bit of an overstatement. It's incredible in that it saved the Big 12. It stabilized the Big 12. But the impact of the 4 new members on the national landscape, let's not go crazy here, Brett. It is not that significant. Again, the significance is that it just made sure that there will be a Big 12. That's the significance of adding the 4 new schools. I believe I will add this to the screen so we can all check this out together. And again, I'm reading from The Athletic. And again, the link's in the description section. I'm sorry, the link is in the live chat. So if you want to join the show. So we've got a plan. And adding those 4 new members, according to Yormark, has been incredible. If we stay at 12, we're perfectly fine with that. No, you're not. You've got a plan that you want to execute. These conference commissioners have become like politicians. He says in one statement, we've got a plan. And so we're not talking about a plan that's built in 45 minutes. We're talking about a plan that takes money, that takes time, that takes cooperation. You know, this is a plan of adding to a conference, a major sports, major football athletic conference. This has taken a lot of time and a lot of effort and money and resources to build this plan. So you don't say we've got a plan and hopefully we can execute it and plan sooner than later. So he wants it to be sooner rather than later. And then he says 2 sentences 2 sentences later that if we stay at 12, we're perfectly fine with that. No, you're not. If the opportunity presents itself where there's something that creates value and aligns well with our goals and objectives, starting with the board, then we're certainly going to pursue it. Well, you already have pursued it. You mean you're going to sign papers. Under your mark, the Big 12 has been aggressive in exploring its options for expansion. The addition of Pac 12 members, primarily Colorado and Arizona, in recent months has been a priority since your mark was hired last summer. The Big 12 has also looked into potentially pursuing more basketball-focused additions, which I think is a tremendous move by the Big 12, going that path as well. That it doesn't have to be all football or all sports universities. Not when this is, and I am not speaking from a place of knowledge here. I've not watched a college basketball game. Basically, that's a general statement. Don't hold me to not having watched like 15 minutes of the NCAA tournament this past year. But basically, I've not watched college basketball for 10 years. And so, but I'm told, I understand from seeing on social media that the Big 12 is the best basketball conference going right now. So why not become dominant? You're not going to become dominant in football. Sorry, Big 12 fans, you are not going to be dominant in football. Not going to happen. You can pile on more numbers of teams to become more relevant just because you've got more territory. And go to it. That's what I would do. Every move your mark has made, that being the 4 schools that have joined the league, that's exactly the move I would have made. You old timers here at the Voice of College Football would remember me saying, or me actually posting the video after Oklahoma and Texas left, that, and in the many live streams that we had in the following days, that I recommended that the Big 12 should add, let me see, BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. Now, of course, they didn't listen to me, but so great move, stabilize the league. Now, I do like this basketball-focused path because you're not going to dominate in football, but if you become the 3rd best football conference, and even if it's a distant 3rd, but you're the best basketball conference and you own March, you become the SEC of basketball in March, go to it. Do it. I think it's somewhat compromised by adding those kind of schools, though, the Gonzagas and UConns of the world, even though UConn, of course, would play football. They're not adding anything in football, but it is compromised a bit because the SEC dominates in football and those schools are fully committed, playing every sport known to man, and they're all fully committed SEC schools, as opposed to having a Gonzaga that doesn't play football be a major force in basketball. But hey, the world is not perfect. Your Mark said he has no specific timeline. Says, from my perspective, I've dealt with it for a whole year. So sooner or later, it would be nice to just kind of push it aside and just focus on the things that are most important. I would love to hear what those things are. Did not address specific expansion targets. Of course not. And let's see if he said anything else. The great thing about my board and my AD partnership is that we collaborate all the time. We can agree to disagree on certain things, and we have throughout the year. I've learned a lot from both governance groups, but again, if within the value equation there is alignment, Power 5 or non-Power 5 will have to pursue it. Okay, so there we go. On June 30th, the Big 12 completed its agreement with ESPN and Fox to extend their media rights partnership through 2030-31. Yormark acknowledged Wednesday that the conference will explore playing some football games on Thursday and Friday. Bingo! Every time I post a video and suggest, or a live stream and suggest that the Pac 12 should be playing on Thursday and Friday nights, I always have a number of knuckleheads shoot me down. And here we've got Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, saying we want to play on Thursday and Friday nights. Seeing those TV windows is an opportunity to further boost the league's profile. Exactly. And we'll get to your comments and questions here in just a second. The Big 12 has extended its partnership with AT&T Stadium and will continue to play its football championship games there through 2030. I believe it's best for a conference to move its championship game around. You move around the championship game. This year's Big 12 championship game will feature a halftime show with a major artist. Good. They're going the entertainment route. And when I say good, I mean, for me personally, I could care less that they're going to get some probably artists that I could care less to see myself, but it's not about some middle-aged guy. It's about bringing in young people and bringing in masses and extending past the sports fan to the fringe sports fan that will watch championship games and will even more so watch championship games if there are other entertainment involved. The conference will also debut a new logo next year. Yep, they should do that. That makes total sense. Yormark said as part of its efforts toward a brand refresh. Well, they need a brand refresh because their brand is leaving. The brand has left. 50% of the league's resources are gone. All right, really good stuff there from Brett Yormark. But again, I find it amusing that he says right out of the gate that we've got a plan. And hopefully, when you hope for something, that's pretty important. When you're hoping for something and you've built a plan that's cost a lot of time and effort and money, that you want to execute the plan sooner rather than later, but we're perfectly fine with staying at 12. No, you're not. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Jackson on the line.
What's up, Mark? How's it going, man?
It is going pretty well. How are you?
I am doing great. I want to talk a little bit about what I heard from Mike Gundy today about the Bedlam.
Yeah, I want to
And
hear about that because I saw the headline. I did not have a chance to delve into it, but I'm guessing he was a bit surly, and I would be as well, because I saw the statement on one of the major sites that Bedlam is dead or gone or history. That's the term he used, history.
well, I don't think it's dead. I think it's just on life support, so to speak. I mean, they're gonna find a way to get it back at some point. I mean,
On a limited basis. I don't see it coming back every year.
yeah, I don't expect it to come back every year either. I mean, it could be like, say, twice a decade or something. Like, say, yeah, that's another thing. I am so happy to see that about the voice of college football being number one. That is so awesome. Congrats, Mark.
We have no idea who these folks are, but you know what? This has become one of my favorite websites. So I appreciate the individuals who brought this to my attention. We will post this and then you can continue here. Jackson, we appreciate you jumping on the line. So continue.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just like twice a decade. I'm thinking we could see the Bedlam return, like say Florida, Miami, where you see it like once a decade, twice a decade. You don't see it every year. So I mean, it's just such a shame. But on the bright side, we did see a little bit of Kansas today. Now those guys are returning 85% of their returning production. You're telling me that's a 10th place team? Like I don't get why everybody thinks they're 10th place. I mean, they're forgetting that they had a top-notch season last year. Well, for Kansas, but they'll have a better year than 6 and 7.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that, Jackson, I completely agree, other than those spots between about 3 or 4 and 11 or so are pretty close together.
For sure. I mean, I would not be surprised if Kansas just goes up this season. I mean, Lance Leopold is going to bring out the best of the best. Maybe we'll see game day come back to Lawrence. I don't know yet. Or at least say the week before rivalry week. That is if Kansas and Kansas State have like 9 wins going into the game. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I just think that the league's fascinating. For the hardcore college football fan who is interested in not just the playoffs, this league is fascinating. I think it's the best league for competitiveness. It's the most competitive league top to bottom. That doesn't mean it's the best.
Right.
I'm not saying that. But, you know, there actually, it would not be a shock, not a complete shock, if the perceived worst team in the league, who I believe is West Virginia. I believe West Virginia was voted last. And unfortunately, I did not act on a ballot I received from the Big 12 to be part of the media to vote on the standings this year and their all conference teams. I'll have to do that next year, but I do appreciate the Big 12 sending me a ballot to vote on the conference all conference team and the league standings. But West Virginia finished last by the media, and Texas, of course, a clear number one. Well, if West Virginia beat Texas this year, yes, it would be a surprise to all of us, but it would not be the surprise to the level of Northwestern beating Michigan or Vanderbilt beating Georgia, or, the top to bottom difference just isn't there in this conference. And that's a fun thing.
That's for sure, man. I mean, and another stat I went over when I was looking at Oklahoma State's schedule is that they are one of the 10 Big 12 teams that have the all four newbies on their schedule. And West Virginia is the other one. The rest of them play at least one of BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and Central Florida. Whereas with Oklahoma State, they're playing Central Florida, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU. Funny thing is, Oklahoma State and BYU are playing on rivalry week. That's the thing I don't understand, but I'm not the schedule maker, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's something we talked about when the Big 12 schedule was released. I just don't understand. Maybe they're in a strange way counter programming against the other conferences, but everybody else is playing rivalry week, and their best rivalries, almost all of the best rivalries, are on the final weekend of the season. In the Big 12, you look at the final weekend of the season, and it's just like they just haphazardly scheduled, and they didn't even, there's nothing there on the final weekend of the season. Kansas and Kansas State don't even play in the final weekend of the season. Just nobody plays that typically does. I just find that kind of odd.
Yeah. I mean, Kansas State, Iowa State, okay. But like Kansas, Cincinnati, oh man, that is not a rivalry week game. I mean, it's a great game, but not a rivalry week game.
Because the other thing that you ensure when you play your rivals on the last weekend of the season is that even if they're bad, there still is some attention. Like if Oregon and Oregon State are no good, there is still some attention given to the game because it's a rivalry game. But if Kansas goes into the final weekend of the season and they're 5-6 and Cincinnati's 4-7, that game, nobody's going to watch that game. Nobody cares about that game. Yeah, it's just odd scheduling by the Big 12. I did not agree with their approach. I would love to have somebody on to discuss why they approached the season so haphazardly as they did. Now, the one thing I could agree upon would be shutting out Oklahoma and Texas on the final week of the season. I would have scheduled them, and I can't remember who they're playing the final weekend. Maybe you do.
Oklahoma's going to play TCU on Black Friday, and Texas is going to play Texas Tech on Black Friday.
Okay, well, those are pretty significant games, or could be.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll play spoiler on rivalry week. That would be fantastic right there.
Yeah, so out of the new teams in the conference, in any of the games involving the new teams, what are the games, Jackson, that you are most looking forward to seeing?
That's a good question. Out of like all the new teams, Central Florida, Houston, Cincinnati, and BYU. Now, unfortunately, BYU Baylor is not on this list. I wish it were though, but I'm going to say BYU Kansas for right now, and Central Florida Baylor. I mean those are going to be great games that I'm looking forward to. Baylor, we're gonna know by September 30th whether that 2021 was a one-off year or if 2022 was a down year. We'll definitely know by that time. And Gus Malzahn, something to watch out for with Central Florida is they're a real Jekyll and Hyde team. They always, and this is especially with Gus Malzahn, he always wins the games that he shouldn't, and he loses the games that he shouldn't. Example, he lost to Navy last year, and he beat Tulane in the regular season. And I'm going to tell you that Central Florida Baylor game, that's going to be one to watch right there.
So the games that I'm the games that I'm most excited to see, that I find the most interesting, are the games involving Texas and Oklahoma against the four new teams, because this is what I hoped for. What I was hoping for this entire 2 years, waiting for Texas and Oklahoma to leave, was that there was going to be overlap, because for a while it didn't appear as though this was going to happen, but that there was going to be overlap between Texas and Oklahoma before they leave the league and the four new teams coming in. So this is the one season we get to see overlap. So I love that that there was not a clean break there. So I want to see as many of the four new teams playing Texas and Oklahoma. And so, for example, I don't like that Texas does not have UCF on its schedule. I would have wanted to see that game, because just think about it. After Texas and Oklahoma leave, what's the likelihood that either one of them is going to schedule UCF, BYU, Houston, maybe, or Cincinnati? It's next to zero.
Yeah, I don't see Texas wanting to get beat down by BYU anytime soon. And Oklahoma, on the other hand, they still have not beaten BYU all time in college football. And that's a shocker to some of the audience here, but it's not a shocker to us, because like everybody talks about like the Texas BYU games, but the Oklahoma BYU game, like I remember the last time they played, that was the night where we started to see an injury history for Sam Bradford. And it was not a pleasant night for Oklahoma football. But I would like to see a BYU beats Texas and Oklahoma this year. I mean, and it's going to be the only season where they're conference members, so that's going to be pretty fun. I mean, Oklahoma, Cincinnati, I think it would have been fun if Luke Fickell was still the head coach of Cincy, but with Satterfield as coach in his first year. I'm not seeing that be a pleasant game for Cincy.
Yeah, a lot of people are forecasting Cincinnati to be a bit down and take a step back this year, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah, for right now, I'm thinking it's going to be last place for them for now. I mean, they do not have a lot of returning products this year. They're just falling apart.
All right, Jackson, anything else you wanted to hit on?
That's about all, Mark. Thank you for having me on.
We appreciate the call, Jackson.
Anytime. Happy Big 12 Media Day, everybody.
This is day one. We've got day two coming up on Thursday. And again, we've got media contributors lined up from Texas, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, TCU, Kansas State, Iowa State, UCF, and West Virginia. So be staying tuned for that throughout the day on Thursday. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. One of the questions intrigued me and a lot of people that Brett Yormark answered. He initially said he wasn't going to touch realignment, but one of the reporters found a clever way around it, and it was a BYU reporter. And he basically asked, hey, BYU's on an island by itself. Are you going to pair us up with another school in our time zone? And Brett Yormark's response was basically, we don't have any plans for that at the moment.
Yeah, so the reporter actually said time zone?
Yes, because Brett Yormark in his opening speech talked about how the Big 12 is the only conference currently in 3 time zones.
Yes, this season. That's going to last for one season. Yes.
I'm just telling you what he said, okay?
Yeah.
I understand the Big 10 is going to be in there next season, but, the Big 12 commissioner's got to put a positive spin on his conference. And that's his job, and he's telling the truth, so. But what do you think about that comment? Do you think people should read into it, or?
Well, he says right here, we do have a plan, and hopefully we can execute that plan sooner than later.
Right, but from what I'm hearing about is that from people analyzing it is instead of going West Coast, maybe they're going to go East Coast. So instead of maybe getting a San Diego State, a Utah, and Arizona, they might get a UConn or Memphis.
Well, as I said a few minutes ago, I totally agree with the approach to bolster their basketball. If you're going to have a reputation for something, why not continue to pile on in basketball and continue to establish yourself as the best basketball conference?
I mean, that makes sense, but what do you think about adding those 2 schools in general? Do you think that's a net good overall? Do you think it's a net negative? What do you think about it if they added UConn or Memphis or both of them?
In football, it just does not move the needle at all. Zero. And I know Memphis has had a decent football run the last few years, and Mike Norvell did a nice job, and before that, Justin Fuente, but nobody watches, nobody cares. They will just be they will be a low-grade version of the other teams that they just brought on. Like Memphis would be the worst program in the conference. And UConn, that would be a basketball move. So the football team would just come with it. And of course, right now, UConn has a coach who knows what he's doing. Therefore, he was able to lift them out of the depths this particular season. But You can't count on Jim Mora being the coach at UConn forever. They may resort to, they're adding the two worst football products that they could possibly add there. That's a basketball move.
Right. And do you think that's the direction the Big 12 should go in general, though? Is more basketball?
Well, I think if they add UConn and Memphis and then maybe they go out to Gonzaga, wow, then they become, again, they have no hopes of ever being the best football conference. They could be the third best football conference, and they can be and as I understand it, already are the best basketball conference generally, but they could just be a wrecking crew in basketball. They could be by far every year the best basketball conference if they go get Memphis, UConn, and Gonzaga. And I have no issue with that. It waters down the football. They become kind of this strange Conference USA kind of football conference, but it doesn't detract from what they've got at the top. And they're going to continue to play. They're just adding football teams at that point. They're just adding football teams to beat up on.
Okay, another comment that Brett Yormark made was he was asked about the recruiting loss of Oklahoma and Texas, and his response was basically, well, if Texas and Oklahoma are such great recruiters, then how come they haven't been to the Big 12 championship game recently? What do you think about that?
Well, recently, meaning Oklahoma's been absent for 2 years. Okay, that's... Again, he wants to emphasize and punctuate his current teams and not the two that are leaving. He doesn't want to say, wow, we're losing the two best brands in our conference. We're losing the two moneymakers in our he's not going to say any of that. But it's true concerning Texas. 2018 was the last championship game for Texas. And before that, nothing, going back to 2009. So they've only played in one in 15 years, roughly. But Oklahoma has lived in the conference championship game. And just because they missed 2 years, he knows what the deal is. He knows that he's losing the brands that mean the most, but he's got to spin it the right way. And he is hoping to God that those two teams don't play in the Big 12 championship game this year.
Right. Another thing that he was talking about was the depth of his conference. And he said that 80% of his team made bowl games last year. And talking about that, do you think the Big 12 is the deepest conference in football?
No. I think that that's its strength, is to be the deepest conference, the most competitive from top to bottom. So the SEC is still deeper than the Big 12. And unless you want to play semantics and say, well, Iowa State or West Virginia or whoever ends up being the worst team in the Big 12 might be better than Vandy. So yes, technically, if you go all the way from the top to the severe bottom, yes, that technically may be a correct statement. However, let's understand within context, the bottom of the SEC is better than the bottom of the Big 12.
Well, I would obviously agree with that, Mark, but we all know why he's doing it. He's doing it because he's got to put his conference in the best possible light.
Yes. Yeah. So,
and that's why
and it's not a ridiculous. Sometimes these commissioners will make ridiculous comments that in no way can be stretched to be anything close to the truth. But that's a reasonable statement about being a deep conference. But if you take the 4 worst football teams in the SEC against the 4 worst in the Big 12, the SEC wins hands down.
You're right. Absolutely. And the final thing I'll ask you is Brett Yormark seems to want to go into Mexico for either playing games or just televising games. He's talking about how ESPN Deportes and Fox Deportes is going to be simulcasting or translating the game in Spanish live. What do you think about that route the Big 12 is going down?
The Hispanic population is the fastest growing population in this country. Now, whether you can convert, but that's been the case for decades. Now, whether you can convert them to American sports fans is another matter. And that's going to take some doing. So just because they're more prevalent in population in society in the country doesn't mean that they're going to be watching college football, but there's a higher chance or possibility that they will be. So why not extend yourself to try to do that? Yeah, I've got no issue with that.
Yeah, I don't either. Mark, the final thing I'll say is this is kind of like the appetizer meal because we all know what the main course is going to be in next week, I believe it is, with the Pac-12 media days, Mark. So
yes,
I'm very much looking forward to that.
Much like people that, have worked in corporations and send out emails before they punch the clock at 5 o'clock and head out the door for the weekend. The Pac-12 is trying to squeeze in that one media day on Friday while everybody's still talking about SEC media days, I guess.
That's all I got for you, Mark. Fight on to USC.
Thanks to Real. Keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Immaculate on the line.
Mark, hey, how you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you?
Pretty good.
What's going on tonight?
I've just been watching a few of these videos from the media days. It's I'm more excited to watch media days this year than I ever have before, and I think it's because of the realignment situation we're in. And it was interesting just to hear some of your Mark's terminology usage.
Such as?
Well, first thing that kind of caught my ear is most people, when we're talking about the power conferences, we say P5. Is that mostly what you would hear?
Yes.
He uses A5.
Oh.
He says A5 for the autonomous 5 instead of Power 5, which is more of a reference to the power that they now have to, create their own rules and whatnot. And it's interesting. It doesn't say anything on its own, but it kind of tells us where his mindset is. And I've been saying for a while, getting towards where they can actually have the ability to use those votes. And when he says he has a plan going forward, it comes off as at least a little believable. But it's interesting how people think that this conference doesn't work when I think it's working great. Would you say that it's a good goal for theirs to not worry about being number one, not worry about being number two, but be the best damn number 3 conference that there could possibly be right now?
Yeah, I made that statement at whatever point, a half hour, 45 minutes ago, that they're not catching the Big Ten or the SEC.
Right.
There's no reason why he shouldn't bring light to that, or that he shouldn't talk about being the best football conference, even though he believes and knows that they can't be. So they took a major step, of course, in doing exactly what you're talking about in reaching that goal by grabbing the 4 best football products that they could possibly get when they were on shaky ground. So they did that. And now, just by sheer numbers, based on what they're looking to do through expansion, whether that's toward the Pac-12 or whether that's a more basketball approach to some of the schools we've just mentioned, yeah, be the 3rd best football conference, just preserve your league, and that's where your money's made. And you're the best basketball conference from what I understand right now, but you can make, the only thing I can't answer is by adding some of these basketball schools that also play football, whether that's Memphis, whether that's UConn, are they hurting their football revenue? Because they can't make that up, even though, 50,000 more people are going to watch a UConn basketball game than somebody else. It's just not going to move the needle during the regular season of the basketball season. But with that extra elite status and elite number of schools from a basketball standpoint, whether that offsets what's going to happen to their football distribution, because the revenue distribution is going to go down in football. If they would add Memphis and UConn, then they're losing money in football. Not losing money, but making less money than they are right now. But they increase the basketball significantly.
Yeah, and that's a lot to unpack there. For me, the Big 12, when I see their focus on basketball, I don't really follow basketball enough to know if it actually is the best conference or if they're just doing the best right now. We'll see how that goes in the future, but I find it interesting that they want to focus on it. And I think it comes down to the part of being the best number 3 that you can be. That being said, I don't think that these basketball moves are good right now. I think they'll be great at some point in time. And so UConn makes me question, why is this one talked about so much more? Is it because of the perceived number 1 basketball brand in America with both, men's and women's and whatnot? Maybe, but I don't think that brings enough right now. So I think that there's more to that. And I tend to think that's because he was doing a lot of reaching out to Fox and ESPN during his talks. And I think it's part of that. I think that that's one that ESPN wants for, reasons that aren't fun to talk about with sports folks.
Well, when you bring in basketball, you do bring in volume of games. So there's a lot of inventory there. I know when I left ESPN, they were up to broadcasting 340 college basketball games a year. So there is a lot of inventory in college basketball. So again, I don't know what the numbers are for a Connecticut or Gonzaga playing basketball off the top of my head. I could actually give it a pretty good rating guess, but in terms of how that converts to money these days, I don't know. But you can multiply it to, so for example, when San Diego State with this debacle with the Mountain West Conference, it was reported that in the recent Fox contract with the Mountain West, that they were going to be showing all 18 games that they had any kind of rights to, San Diego State games. Now they wouldn't all be on Fox; they would be on FS1 and a number of their affiliates. But there's a lot of inventory there.
Yeah, but the thing is with basketball with ESPN, they already have a lot of content. Now they don't have the Big Ten anymore, but the ACC for now still provides a lot of content. The SEC is getting better at it, and with the deal with the Big Ten, the Big 12, they already have a lot of content. So, yes, UConn is better, but it's not about its whole value. It's about how much value it provides above the content that they already have.
Sure.
And when we're already talking that it's basketball, we're not talking about it as big of a chunk. So, like I said, I think that they're good at it at a particular time. I think the Big 12 is going to have basketball-only schools. I think a lot of that's going to come from the Northeast. Personally, I'm eyeing Villanova, Georgetown, St. John's, and Seton Hall. And I think that that's going to be part of their thing going forward, but that's probably not a priority now. So all the talk about UConn, I don't know, it might be gamesmanship to try to loosen up other schools. It might be an ode to ESPN, like, yeah, we'll let them in at some point in time so you can get your tax deal with the state of Connecticut. But I don't really see the value in it themselves. So I kind of think that there's something else to that play with the amount of talk that there is. But because right now, if they're going to try and get that contract up even more, it's got to be football ads, I would think. And while every game has a loser, you've kind of brought that in just recently. So I think that their next moves probably should come from the P5. Just my opinion.
Yeah, unless the Gonzaga option is intriguing because it doesn't take away from the football, but adds to the basketball.
Yeah, you could probably give them a small payout for now, and immediately they probably start bringing you at least the payouts from being in the March Madness. But they might want to know that there's some other schools in the area first, I would think, because you're not just getting them for basketball, you're getting them for all sports. Or are they talking just basketball for Gonzaga?
I don't know. I would think that they would be brought in for all sports, but I can't answer that.
Because that's a big deal. Like when you're having all those secondary sports, traveling, going places, the Big 12 really only has one option that's somewhat near them. That's BYU, and that's not near them. So
no, it looks like it on a map, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not at all.
It's not.
So I tend to think that they're just showing off these are who we're having talks with, and we can say publicly that we're talking to Gonzaga because we're not going to get any tortious interference claims from this. They can say that about UConn because UConn's independent in football. So they tend to be safe to talk about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So
all right, sir.
Appreciate that. But
anything
anyway,
else?
No, like I said, I just found it kind of interesting. Some of his talks that he had on the side with other media companies were definitely realignment related, and so just really kind of looking forward to see what we get from some of the other media days. But good talking with you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate the call. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football, and this should be a good call. We got Tony Altimore here.
Hey, how are you doing?
strategist.
So
Tony,
we are
doing well. How are you?
Good. So we're not going to talk about this much tonight. We have our Pac-12 show tonight at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. So if anybody's online, we'd love to have you join us. One thing I will add to what DeReal was saying is the commissioner today gave a number of follow-up interviews. He gave one to a Baylor YouTube channel that included the Baylor AD. And they used a lot more kind of coded language, but it was pretty clear they have not given up their quest for hoping that Pac-12 teams will leave them and join them. Again, we continue to be told by people at some of those schools that that's not happening, but they definitely seem to still want it. The interesting question will be is if nobody wants to join them from the Pac, will they still sort of be on this expansion thirst? And it reminds me a lot of, you see this with CEOs. The new CEO comes in and they want to do a merger. They want to do a big deal to make, sort of make themselves feel good. And so, people say, last caller had a great point. He said, I really think they should stick to P5. But, well, who would that be? Because nobody from the Big Ten is joining them. Nobody from the SEC is joining them. Nobody from the ACC wants to join them. And nobody from the Pac-12 wants to join them. So assuming that holds true, there's nobody there. So the question would be, who would be next? I mean, UConn and Memphis would be great if they want to grow. But I think the big question is, again, does that make sense? But it was interesting. He definitely, you hit it, Mark, when he said we have a plan, and then he sort of backed away from it. I think he's just hedging his bets because they pretty much know at this point that teams are probably not going to join them. But they've thrown it out and so publicly put it out there that I think they still hope for it.
So in regards to the basketball heavy schools that do play football, UConn, Memphis in particular, I got to think that distributing the money, the football money with two other schools is a huge detriment to the other schools in the conference. They're obviously not adding value from a football standpoint, and they've got to distribute the money to two other schools.
Well, so Memphis and UConn are both better in SP Plus than, SP Plus is not a perfect measure, but they're better in SP Plus than a lot of what they have. What they have is They've got a lot more bottom than they want to admit to. It might not be quite as bad as like, Colorado bottom, which is funny because they're trying to add even more to the bottom in that regard, or they would love to anyway. But the big question there is, would ESPN be willing to pony up the money for those teams?
Yeah, and that's more my question, is not from a football standpoint, but from a value standpoint in revenue dollars and TV dollars.
So their contract does not allow for it. Their fans claim that, of course, their fans think that like TV networks will like throw money at them, like people throw rice at weddings. So I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly that's something that if they are good at negotiating with TV people, and they seem to be, they might be able to get that money out of the TV networks. And if so, good for them. I'll tell you, both of those help fill some of their gaps because they have this eastern flank and then a giant gap. And then they've got their Great Plains, then they've got BYU all alone. I mean, it's a geographic nightmare. Now, one of the things about the Big 12 that's interesting, and we've talked about this, Mark, on a couple of your shows, I think on the West Virginia channel before, is that the Big 12 does not travel like most other conferences do in other sports. The Big 12 athletic departments tend to be much smaller than other departments, and they don't have conference seasons in a lot of sports like other conferences do. So, for example, in the Pac-12, they have Pac-12 tennis season and Pac-12 swimming season. In the Big 12, they don't have that. You just do whatever you do locally for the whole season, and then at the end of the year, you go to a Big 12 tournament somewhere. So, again, that's if you have a big athletic department, that's kind of a pain in the neck, right? Because you don't get any scheduling benefits. But if you, like they only have, I think, three men's swim teams right now, I think, in the whole conference. So, there's not like a swimming season they can really even have. One of them is usually the national champion. So it was pretty good. But
although it does mitigate a lot of the traveling issues that you talked about.
Yeah, because you're not doing as much travel. But in the sports where you are, it's kind of a pain. So one of the nice things about Memphis is in the middle of the whole mess and would give them something in the Deep South because they don't have anything in the Deep South. And UConn gives them exposure to a huge New York market, and they seem to be very thirsty for that New York market. You've heard a lot of rumors of St. John's, Villanova, whatever, but UConn certainly puts them into that market. It's a great school. UConn would be academically the best school in the Big 12, and it would have their largest athletic department in terms of number of athletes. So it would be a pretty solid addition for them.
So if you are going to put together the football, the entire athletic component, the TV markets, and it doesn't seem as though academics come into play much with them, but I'm sure there's I
like it. It's a nice bonus, but yeah. It's not like the Pac-12 wants to make sure you have academics. You are a major institution first. The Big 12, it's a nice bonus.
So in what type of order would you place these candidates, putting all of those components together in regards to if you were running the Big 12 going after these schools?
There's 5 that I would go for if I were them, and you can weight whichever ones you want within those 5. Now, this is assuming that San Diego State is in whatever delayed fashion still going to the Pac-12, which we continue to be told is happening. Whether it's this year or next year, whichever. But assuming San Diego State is off the table, there's 5 that we did the math on for one of your shows. I forget when one's with Joey a while ago that I think still hold, which are UConn, Memphis, Fresno, Boise, South Florida. Those are the 5 that sort of fit the best. And you can make other arguments about East Carolina. You could argue for UAB. You could argue for Temple. There's a lot of things that have, one factor or another. Those are the 5 that sort of fill their holes that they have, because I mean, Central Florida, you want to talk about a geographic island.
Mhm.
Central Florida is way more of a geographic island than Brigham Young. So if you could add South Florida there, then when you are sending volleyball and basketball and soccer, I don't even know if they have soccer. I don't think they do. But the sports where you do send the teams to somebody, you're then sending you're sending 2 teams to Florida to do a flip back, which is what the Pac-12 has always done. It's one of its great strengths in its Olympic sports scheduling. So there are some big advantages to that. USF, great school, more Florida presence. It would make a lot of sense. Boise is Boise is probably the best football product that is out there and available among the group of 5. But they lack the academic focus, they lack the market focus. And that's kind of a killer. But those are less of a concern for the Big 12. Fresno, I think, would be a great anchor for them in California, and they seem obsessed with the idea of having late night stuff. Again, I don't know if it's that good an idea, but they're really into it. They want to have games late at night. I did laugh. The Baylor people were all so proud. They're like, "Oh, we're doing the night," and they complained for weeks after, when they had a night game at BYU, that it went till 1 a.m, and they were so mad about it. So it isn't a game. It isn't like Monopoly, where you're trying to just get all the properties like people think it is. There's trade-offs to it.
Yeah, there's some comments coming in about Boise State not being that great of late, but yes, that was quite the standard to keep. I ran the numbers the other day: 115 and 29 wins and losses over 10 years. They were just phenomenal, and they're still playing 75% winning football over the last 10 years. So they're still
they're still doing really well. As is Fresno, who's always been great. By the way, UCF. Whoever says UCF is better. UCF's not on the board anymore. UCF's a member of the Big 12.
And the one thing I did notice, at least in the research I did in the last week about Boise, is even though it's a small market, it's grown from about 260,000 to 330 here in the last just couple of years. So there must be people. Are those people moving from California? Where are they coming from?
Yeah, it's kind of a relocation area. I mean, again, it's not a bad market, right? It's just, with the Pac-12, they're looking at Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Southern California, Boise, and so that's one of the issues. UNLV is another one, but UNLV has not moved the needle athletically since Tark left, and I don't think they've ever been ranked in football, have they?
No, they have never been ranked.
Never been ranked in that's bad. So that's just UNLV. If they could get it together, it would be great. I always joke to when I'm on our West Virginia channel, I always joke to the West Virginia folks to say, will you move your campus to Vegas? Because if you'd move West Virginia University to Las Vegas, the Pac-12 would bring you in tomorrow.
The only reason we have that conversation, or UNLV's brought up, is because of their location. Location. That's it.
And so you got, and for the Big 12 again, whether it's R1 or R2 doesn't really make a big difference. These are all decent schools. A guy on Twitter, Genetics56, who does some really interesting posts on realignment stuff, did some analysis. He really liked the idea of East Carolina for the Big 12. So there are a lot of options that they would have, but the first thing is, it's clear they are going to wait till the last minute to see if by chance any Pac school will come to them. I think that's what they want. It's just not going to happen.
And speaking of the Pac-12, our chat show is coming up with Tony and company, 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific time.
We'd love to have you guys join us.
We are just about an hour away. Anything in particular on tap for that discussion?
So we've got some guests coming in, and we're going to do a breakdown looking at each of the teams and their projected win-loss and kind of where we are to get the season kicked off. And then next week we have Oski and the Tree, who are going to rip on each of the other 10. So that's going to be kind of fun.
And I would be disappointed, Tony, if there weren't some funny graphics involved.
Oh, they'll be good. Well, I mean, we've got Oski in the tree. What more can we ask for? It's going to be good.
Awesome.
Anyway, thank you guys. We'll love to see you guys at 10:30.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Tony Altamore, a bastion of historical knowledge, current knowledge, perspective, context to all of it. I know some of you disagree at times. Of course, he's not perfect. Not everything he says is exactly not everything I say is exactly accurate all the time. You cannot always forecast the future, but just tremendous perspective. And we will continue to have Tony on throughout the summer in regards to our deep dives. We've done Texas, Michigan, Florida State, USC, and others where we break down the landscape of that particular university, the athletics, the academics, and the football, of course. And again, we're an hour away from the Pac-12 chat show. If you are just jumping on board, we've gone through Brett Yormark's comments. We've gone through a little Oklahoma State bedlam. Mike Gundy saying that bedlam is history. And of course, he's not technically correct because they will play one more game and we don't know what the future holds. However, I very much am there with Mike Gundy in that I would have stated the same thing, basically saying, you know what, we can no longer get caught up in bedlam. I can no longer make that a priority. And of course, for Mike Gundy, it's good riddance because he never beats Oklahoma. They did 2 years ago. And I don't even remember where that game landed this past season. Both schools went 6-6 in the regular season. I don't remember off the top of my head because that was so off my radar because of the plight of both teams this past year. But the year before, of course, Oklahoma State won a huge game in Lincoln Riley's final game to get to the Big 12 championship game. But other than that, we're looking at something like 3-17 Mike Gundy against OU. So for him, yeah, good riddance. See ya. But he's right. I would be a bit salty and surly concerning that topic as well if I was Mike Gundy. I wouldn't want to, Oklahoma State 7-5, Oklahoma 6-6. Thank you, Wet Blanket. I was getting confused because Oklahoma State, of course, lost the bowl game to Wisconsin to finish 7-6. Yes. So, yes. 7-6, Oklahoma State after the bowl loss. Oklahoma lost its bowl game to Florida State, 6-7. Just not an important game on a national perspective landscape. All right, let's see what Sark had to say, because this is the guy that that has the football team on paper. Excuse me, that is the best team in a conference relative to the rest of the conference. Texas, as it stands right now, is not Georgia, is not Ohio State, is not Michigan, is not Alabama. However, versus the rest of the conference, they should be better than everybody in the Big 12 by a wider gap than any other school in the country. But we know where that's gotten them in the past. Porter's telling us Sark, 8-4 coach. Yeah, that's what he's been at best. His lifetime winning percentage is not 8-4 even. My big knock against Steve Sarkisian has been that he has coached at two enormous football powers. One, a blue blood of blue bloods at the very top of the sport historically, and one in the top 15 range at Washington. And he has not achieved the success of his predecessor, nor his successor. So 4 coaches have coached better at those schools than he has. Now, it's close, but I would argue that all 4 coaches did a better job than Steve Sarkisian at USC and Washington. So what caused him to be able to earn the Texas job? Well, his work at Alabama, and of course the magic touch of Nick Saban. And he did not on the field crash and burn at USC and Washington. He didn't do a horrible job, did not do a pathetic job, but just did not come through with those schools. All right, we're reading from Heather Dinich's article at ESPN. Not since 2009 have expectations been so high for Texas. I don't know about that. So I think she comes out of the gate with a questionable statement there. There have been plenty of seasons Texas has been ranked as high as they will be in the preseason AP poll. Anyway, okay, the Longhorns are an overwhelming preseason favorite to win the Big 12. Okay, Steve Sarkisian said today he hopes a league title will be a great send-off in Texas's final season. Well, that's kind of an obvious statement. Okay, then he says a bunch of generic things that are obvious. I want to win a championship. Okay, what coach does not want to win a championship? When asked if this could be a career-defining season for him, well, that's a decent question, because I would say otherwise, no. Well, his career-defining seasons are going to be in the SEC, but if he never makes it to the SEC, so 5-7, 8-5. If they go 8-5 with their roster and in a marginal Big 12, where they are better than everybody on the conference schedule, where the second best team most likely is Oklahoma, and they are decidedly better on paper than Oklahoma. If they go, let's just say 8-5 again, it would be difficult to fire a coach after 9-4. 8-5 seems to be another lackluster type of record. If they finished 8-5, even if they won the bowl game, even if that was with a bowl loss, they're 8-4 in the regular season. I guess it's possible that you could go 8-4, lose to Bama, and make it to the conference championship game, because that would be 6-3 in conference. Sandra's telling me not happening, Mark. I don't know what she's talking about there in regards to their record, I guess. 8-5. You can't see Texas going 8-5. I'm not predicting that, but it would not surprise me. And then he's gone. He's out. I would love to win a championship our last year in the Big 12. Obviously. What else did he have to say? It would be a great send-off. He basically said nothing here. Brett Yormark, on the other hand, a lot of good nuggets to pick apart. But for Steve Sarkisian, he said, I felt like last year we were almost too one-dimensional, too reliant on Bijan and Roshan for what they were able to do running the ball. We felt like we had to evolve our passing game to get back to where I'm accustomed to doing it. Our ability to throw the football now is going to be able to be back to where we like it to be. Okay. Sark says here, generally and historically, year 2 in our system is where you take that big step. Okay. We'd have to go through his quarterbacks. He's specifically talking about quarterbacks. Now, I don't believe their teams have historically taken a big step in year 2. Again, I just believe Texas could have done so much better in hiring a coach. But the jury's still out. He still has a shot to do something. And if we look at Sark's second year at Washington, after going 5-7, they went 7-6. Okay, big deal. USC, he went 9-4, and then after 5 games that second season, of course, he was having his off-field issues and gone. And then at Texas, 5-7, 8-5. He did nothing at Washington. They went 5-7. Sure, he was taking over a bad program, granted, but a bad program with resources. Not a bad program, a bad football team, top-notch program. 5-7, 7-6, 7-6, 7-6, 8-4. And he took the USC job. So a slight improvement in year 5. Took him 5 years, and it was just a slight improvement from 7-6 to 8-4. Then again, USC, we never get to find out what would have happened there. Texas 5-7, 8-5. Texas, they should not lose more than one game in the conference. And Sandra, yes, I do know Washington was 0-12 before Sark. I remember that season very well. I'm talking about the program, the facilities, the infrastructure, everything involving Washington, their relationships with high school coaches. In terms of what would be a good example? Nebraska went 3-9 2 years ago. They went 4-8. They've basically had the same record as Rutgers the last 2 years and a zillion other awful programs. Nebraska is not Rutgers. It's a much better program. Washington, even in going 0-12, yes, a lot of things were broken, but their ability to bounce back was obvious. We are just about 45 minutes away from the Pac-12 chat show, 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific, talking Pac-12 football. And again, we're really going to blow it up tomorrow concerning the Big 12. So we were supposed to have a couple guests tonight. Unfortunately, a few things went haywire on us, and we were not able to do anything there. Let's see. So looking at our schedule on Thursday here at the Voice of College Football, we've got Thursday. So we're going to go live Thursday at 1 Eastern. And we've got Jeff Sharon from SB Nation, UCF Talk, followed by Melissa Triebwasser, TCU. And then Wolfman's Call over on the West Virginia channel at 4 o'clock. We've got Jason Watkins, Oklahoma, Tim Fitzgerald, Kansas State. And then at 6:30 Eastern, we've got Levi Stevenson from SB Nation on Iowa State. So we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 Big 12 contributors coming on Thursday afternoon. It just struck me, actually, it has struck me about 5 times in the last couple hours, but I've been live since 6 o'clock, that I still haven't eaten anything today. So we will do that here very soon, meaning like right now. So thank you so much for being here. Nobody else has called in. Again, I'm going to be online talking Big 12 football. And again, anytime we, unless there is just a major story where we are hyper-focused on that particular story, like we were with Pat Fitzgerald. When was that? Monday night, Pat Fitzgerald Monday night. You can always call concerning college football, even though we're talking Big 12 Media Days, about anything concerning college football. And we are going to hit Big 12 Media Days hard with a vengeance on Wednesday. That would be today. Check that. Thursday and Friday, we've got our West Virginia show We also have coming on the line Tim Fitzgerald, who covers Kansas State. All right, good stuff coming up here. Also, the top running back in the nation, or arguably the top running back in the nation, Taylor Tatum, makes his decision and commitment announcement, USC Oklahoma on Friday. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Please, on your way out, grab the Amazon link in the description section of the video, put it somewhere where you will not forget it, and you will use it when you jump on Amazon. Thank you so much for that. It's the same shopping experience, doesn't cost you a penny. We will be covering Big 12 football throughout the week for media days. And we've got so many other exciting things to let you know about that we have planned here at the Voice of College Football, as we will unveil our postseason schedule, meaning our post-game schedule of all the teams we are going to cover this fall. Thanks for being here. Next show's Pac-12 Chat Show. You see it on the banner right there in 45 minutes right here at the Voice of College Football.